It's back to the drawing board after the state Supreme Court rejects another set of district maps. We have reaction from two members of the committee. There are renewed efforts to change the requirements to vote in Ohio, what one lawmaker wants to add to the list of must-haves. And students walk out of school in protest of House Bill 616. We ask the governor where he stands on the proposed ban on teaching sexual orientation and gender identity to young children. Thank you so much for joining us for Face the State. I'm Tracy Townsend. It's happened again. For the fourth time, the Ohio Supreme Court struck down the newest set of legislative maps. In this week's ruling, the court said the maps were unconstitutional and gerrymandered. Now the redistricting committee has until May 6th to come up with a new set. One member of that committee, Senator Vernon Sykes, tweeted saying he hopes the Republicans will work with the Democrats to draw maps in an open and transparent manner. The governor's office tells us they are still reviewing the ruling, but the governor is concerned that the process is moving away from competitive districts. Because of this back and forth, the current May 3rd primary will not include state, House, and Senate seats. Early voting is underway for other races. This week, Ohio's poll worker tracker showed 24 counties have met the minimum number of poll workers needed. Franklin County is about 100 workers short. There's also concern that even more poll workers will be needed for the second primary. Former President Donald Trump will return to Ohio ahead of the May 3rd primary. He will headline an evening rally at the Delaware County Fairgrounds on April 23rd. The Associated Press reports he's expected to stump for U.S. House candidate Max Miller. Earlier this week, Governor Mike DeWine was asked if he is seeking President Trump's endorsement.
Sure, would love it, but we love anyone's endorsement. So love the former president's endorsement. Sure, absolutely.
Ohio lawmakers say they may soon consider a change in requirements for voting in our state. State Senator Teresa Gavarone, who's running for Congress, introduced some new legislation. Under Senate Bill 320, Ohioans would be required to show a photo ID when voting in person. Voters who choose to vote by mail would be required to provide both of the following: driver's license and or state ID number, or a photocopy of their driver's license or state ID, the last four digits of their social security number. The bill also provides every Ohio citizen 17 years or older the opportunity to get a free state identification card. Senator Gavarone cites 2021 polling that shows 80% of Americans support requiring a photo ID. And she told me the change would improve election integrity and security in our state.
What do you say to critics of these kinds of legislative efforts that say it's meant to close voting to people of color?
I find that insulting, honestly.
Why?
To say that there are people who won't be able to get an ID because of the color of their skin. I mean, that's we want to make sure that an ID is accessible to everybody.
Well, I don't know that that's the criticism. I think the criticism is that it makes it more difficult for people to vote if you're changing the rules.
Well, it's important that everyone be able to get an ID, show an ID, show a photo ID. We want to make sure everyone, regardless of regardless of race, everyone should be able to vote, to have that ID. If someone can't get an ID right now, there are so many doors that are closed to them. So it's important that everyone be able to get an ID, and it's important that we do further tighten our election security. It's important that we want to make sure it is easy for Ohioans to vote. We want to make sure that it's just hard to cheat.
Well, and I hear you saying that, but I'm wondering, are there specific issues? I know you mentioned the one person who said she couldn't vote because they said she'd already voted. But I mean, in actuality, this is not a state where there's a problem with people cheating in trying to vote.
Well, we want to make sure that we are constantly reviewing our legislation to make sure we're doing everything we can.
Senate Bill 320 has to be assigned to a committee for more discussion and consideration. Hundreds of students walked out of Hilliard-Darby High School this week, demonstrating their support for the LGBTQ+ community. Students organized the walkout to protest House Bill 616. If it passes, it would ban both instruction and materials about sexual orientation and gender identity from kindergarten through 3rd grade. 10 TV's Kiana Deiches spoke with people on both sides of the debate.
When the clock hit 1 p.m., hundreds of students walked out of Hilliard-Darby High School in solidarity. Just outside the campus, Nikki Buskirk walked with them.
So many of those students look like my son, and it's important for my son to be able to be himself and all of himself when he grows up, and it's important for them to be able to be themselves. And I just wanted to let them know that they're not alone.
Not alone in supporting LGBTQ+ friends, and not alone in trying to stop House Bill 616 from becoming law. Sarah Stevenson's daughter was one of the organizers.
I told her, make sure you read the bill so that you understand it and you can talk knowledgeably about it. And I said, if you're still wanting to protest, I said, absolutely, I'll go for it. I'm all for it.
But not all adults are for it.
I don't know anyone who thinks it's a great idea to be talking to first graders or second graders or kindergarten children in regard to sex education in school. I just don't think that that's the proper role of the school.
The bill would restrict both instruction and materials about sexual orientation and gender identity until 4th grade in all public and most private schools. It would also ban critical race theory.
Parents are not only the first teachers. You know, we want parents to be directly involved in what goes on in the schools. They have every right to do that. It's their child.
Stevenson says at the high school level, students should have their say too.
They're pretty astute about things that they want to learn about, the conversations that they want to be able to have. So I think that's important that they have a way to say, this is what we want to learn and discuss. It's just important, like I said, that all students feel safe and included in their school environment.
That was Kiana Deiches reporting. The bill was introduced last week. So far, it only has 2 sponsors and would have to be assigned to a committee before it can be put on the calendar for a vote. The state's largest school district already came out against House Bill 616. The superintendent of Columbus City Schools signed onto a letter condemning the legislation. The letter calls it, quote, shameful and divisive. And the statement goes on to say the bill aims to undermine the district's ability to embrace and support all students fully. You can read the entire statement from the Columbus City Schools District at 10tv.com. Starting this summer, there will be some new rules for hourly workers in Ohio and their overtime pay. A new law defines when you can clock that OT and when you can't. Basically, the biggest change with this law is now that hourly workers will have to opt in with written consent if they want to join a case for unpaid wages. 10 TV's Lindsay Mills has what legal experts are saying about the change.
Senate Bill 47, as signed into law, prohibits opt-out class actions for overtime violations.
That's a really big deal because workers may not want to opt in for a variety of reasons, like they're scared of retaliation. A class action lets them join the case without having to opt in, and this law takes that option away.
Others say it streamlines the litigation process.
We won't be looking at hybrid lawsuits anymore. We will only be looking at an opt-in format, which is what is done in the federal courts.
The law also exempts employers for paying overtime for your commute to and from a work site and performing certain activities that require insubstantial or insignificant periods of time outside work hours.
What does that mean for an hourly worker?
You know, I think if we're talking about that portion, there is not a gigantic change for hourly workers because tasks that their employer asks them to do, those are still going to be compensable, just like they would be under the prior version of the law.
One thing as a litigator I can tell you is I've never had a lawsuit under just Ohio law based on any of the de minimis or the traveling to and from a principal place of work provisions that this law now kind of clears up and says that you can't sue. under this.
While some say this is needed clarification, others say there is no benefit for hourly workers. Bottom line, make sure you're on the same page with your boss.
This is an excellent time for a conversation between the employee and the employer.
And we thank Lindsay Mills for that report. Again, the significant change here is in regard to class action lawsuits of overtime violations. This law takes effect July 6th. Yeah. It's been about 5 months since President Biden signed a bill that would give historic funding to the Amtrak rail system. Rail enthusiasts are hoping the Amtrak rail expansion would connect the 3C and D corridors, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, and Dayton. But what's happening now? A spokesperson for the governor says he's asked the Rail Development Commission to engage with Amtrak to determine the feasibility and the cost of the routes ID'd in the Amtrak Connects Us proposal. A shortage of referees could cause cancellations for your child's next sporting event. After the break, how the Ohio High School Athletic Association is looking to get those numbers up. And still ahead, supplying the classroom not a cheap assignment for teachers. That's why there's a new push to help. Welcome back to Face the State. Perhaps you noticed this at your child's sporting event, but the state of Ohio is seeing a decrease in the number of officials. 10 TV's Brian Somerville explains what the problems are, how the Ohio High School Athletic Association is looking to get the numbers up, and a dangerous growing concern officials have.
It's just gotten way out of hand.
870 miles from Columbus, Ohio, Christy Howard sits in her office in Mississippi, wanting you to know this is why.
Love the game, love the kids, love the environment, love being out there.
It's why she started being an umpire 10 years ago. The last 4 or 5, though, she says threats of violence and assault have escalated.
The whole parent group was extremely rowdy from the get-go.
This past Saturday, while being an umpire for a 12-year-old's softball game, a group of parents, she says, became loud and started cursing. Howard had already thrown one parent out of the game by the time the 4th inning came, where a player, she says, slid underneath a tag. She called the runner safe. A parent in the stands called Howard out. That parent was also ejected.
And when she was leaving, she turned around and she was like, when you step off this field, I'm going to slap the F out of you.
And when the game was over, Howard says that woman was waiting.
And then bam, like she was there. And she says, what do you got to say now? And punched me.
Sunday, she posted to Facebook a picture of her black eye and a warning saying why parents see a decrease in officials at games. This is why. The post has been shared more than 23,000 times, and the problems she is facing in Mississippi, the same problems school districts are facing right here in Ohio.
It's almost turned into an epidemic that, we're scrambling to try to get people to want to do this.
Jay Wolf is the athletic director at Olentangy High School. Last week, he posted to Twitter saying games are being played with no umpires. Bo Rugg with the Ohio High School Athletic Association says more is being done to get more officials, from upping the pay to schools putting in officiating curriculum to hopefully in the next few months putting training classes online.
We know at some point we'll gain some momentum on this. The bad news, obviously, is that doesn't help us today.
Rugg says the number of officials across the country right now is down. Here in Ohio, it's not the worst, but it's not good.
10 years ago, OHSAA documented more than 16,600 officials here in the state. This year, it's just above 13,000.
And there's a number of reasons for that, right? I mean, COVID, the economy, sometimes life just gets in the way, sure. But the number one reason I'm told why the number of officials is down, it's you.
The bottom line is the biggest, far and away, reason people leave officiating or don't want to go into officiating is because of fan behavior.
That ranges, he says, from yelling, cursing, and assaults.
You don't agree with calls, that's fine. But the ugliness that's out there is unbelievable.
When you look at your eye, is that worth your love for the games?
I'm currently struggling.
Howard says she's using this moment to call for more legislation to protect officials. And this is why it's needed. In Columbus, Bryant Somerville, 10 TV News.
Last June, the Ohio House voted to approve a bill that would increase penalties for assaulting sports officials. House Bill 44 would require a mandatory fine of $1,500 and 40 hours of community service for a misdemeanor offense. The bill has not been approved yet by the state Senate. The tax filing deadline is tomorrow. Right now, teachers can write off $250 worth of school supplies, but there's a push in Washington to increase that amount. 10 TV's Lindsay Mills looks at the difference that change could make.
Inside Ecole Kenwood French Immersion Elementary School in Columbus.
Spending money on just those little extra things that make learning fun and relevant.
Amy Pace, a third grade teacher,
Crayons.
Uses little surprises to make a big impact, and it goes beyond stickers and pencils.
I may spend money and go get things that I need to recreate the Polar Express in the room.
Even though she says she doesn't think much about it, it all adds up. Right now, teachers can write off $250 worth for taxes. There's new proposed legislation backed by Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown to increase that to $1,000. And teachers like Amy Pace say it would make a big difference.
Usually Amazon is probably my number one go-to.
On Amazon alone, she spends
Probably way more than maybe a couple $1,000s a year.
While many teachers utilize the convenience of Amazon, they also seek out discount supply stores.
Supply stores like Terrific Teaching Tools in Gahanna.
Definitely.
For the last 12 years, this supply store has been helping teachers from all over. Some drive in from out of state.
Any store that's going to offer you a discount, whether it's 10, 20%, educators usually jump on that.
Don't hesitate to go the extra mile. In Columbus, Lindsay Mills, 10 TV News.
And do you know a teacher who goes above and beyond? Help us honor our classroom heroes. Whether your children are learning in person or virtually, head over to 10tv.com/heroes. There's a form, complete that, and it helps us get the teachers the recognition they so richly deserve. They work to keep the roads clear and smooth, but the job comes with a dangerous risk. One ODOT worker details his firsthand experience of getting hit in a work zone. National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week just wrapped up. This display is up in front of the ODOT headquarters in Delaware. The 20 cones you see there represent each of the workers hurt or killed last year. There's also a sign that reads, "Slow down, 4 workers, save a life." This week, at least 3 ODOT vehicles were hit by other cars. All of the crashes happened in the Columbus area. You are looking on your screen right now at the damage. ODOT says crashes in work zones, well, that's a major issue. 10 TV's Ashley Bornanson spoke with one man who experienced the dangerous situation himself.
Apparently, I was in the way. They sideswiped my vehicle and kept going.
Matt Bruning, press secretary for the Ohio Department of Transportation, stresses the importance of work zone safety.
I was just coming back to Columbus from a work zone awareness event.
He saw the dangers firsthand of what happens with reckless drivers in work zones. The irony, not so funny. Another vehicle struck Bruning while Bruning was driving through the I-70 work zone in Columbus. Police say an officer clocked a vehicle going 73 on a 45 when they struck Bruning.
And that's unacceptable. There's no reason anybody should be going that fast in a work zone, ever.
The suspect then ran away on foot.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Down! On the ground!
Columbus police body camera shows the suspect's arrest.
At those speeds in a work zone, that's probably not a survivable crash if one of our people get hit.
Overnight, 2 other ODOT vehicles were struck while sweeping I-71 near Morse Road. ODOT reps tell me this is yet another scary reminder of the risks encountered every day in work zones.
We had nearly 4,800 work zone crashes in the state of Ohio last year.
Bruning says it's critical drivers slow down and pay attention in work zones. Not just for the workers, but for the drivers and passengers too.
Give those crews room to work. Allow that extra space between you and the vehicle in front of you.
According to ODOT, statewide, there have already been 71 ODOT vehicles hit so far this year. Bruning's crash isn't included in that number because he's not a road worker. However, That number is almost half of what we saw in total last year. In 2021, 154 ODOT vehicles were hit. In 2020, 125 ODOT vehicles were hit.
These are real people who deserve to be able to work in the safest environment possible. That's on us as drivers.
In Columbus, Ashley Bornanson, 10 TV News.
This past week also marked Black Maternal Health Week. It's an effort to address the health disparities Black moms and their children face every day. In Ohio, the infant mortality rate is 3 times higher for Black babies than it is for white babies. The Eliminating Racial Disparities in Infant Mortality Task Force aims to eliminate the disparities by the year 2030. Representative Catherine Ingram is the co-chair of the Ohio Black Maternal Health Caucus, and she says the first step in fixing the disparity issue is admitting there is a disparity issue.
We have to, at first, acknowledge the disparity. And that's one of the things I said to the governor when we were first talking about racism as a public health crisis. And I said to the governor, one of the things that we have to do and why we had the resolution is that we have to first recognize that the disparity exists, that Black mothers, Black babies are dying at a considerably higher rate than other groups of people, especially white people, white mothers and white babies. And so when you look at that, you have to say, it's almost like, and he says, well, why do we have to say that out loud? People know now things are much better. I said, because you have to say it. It's like an alcoholic. Until you admit that you are an alcoholic, you're never going to get cured. You're never going to go for the real cure. You're going to always still go to the bar and say, I only have one. And our reality is that until we admit that racism has created some of what we have today and that the disparities continue to exist, are we ever going to be able to address them?
Another bill recently introduced in the House pushes to expand access to mental health care. This legislation would require public hospitals to designate 5% of their inpatient capacity for people seeking mental health care. The representative behind it says she knows this won't solve all the issues, but says it's one thing that can change now.
The mental health system in America needs much more systemic reform and improvement than what this bill or any individual bill can offer. But until that systemic reform happens, we have to do little things within our power to make sure that people are being helped in crisis situations in the short term.
The bill does allow hospitals to waive the requirement during emergencies.
It is still trying to convey that if the hospital is not at capacity or dealing with a mass disaster, if it has, if it's under normal circumstances, which frankly right now, I think that the stage that we're in with the pandemic is the new normal, then they need to be responding to patients who are coming to them in crisis.
State Representative Monique Smith says she's reaching out to hospitals to see how this change would impact them and to get feedback. Right now, that bill is waiting to be assigned to committee. We do certainly thank you all for joining us on this Sunday. Remember, if it affects you and your family here in Ohio, we are here to make sure those accountable face the state.